Warning, some viewers may find the following footage deeply disturbing.
You're a fucking genius.
Hey, this is Kurt Wallace, and we have Jack Hunter with us again. And Jack, thanks for taking some time. We're going to talk today about the libertarian reaction to Donald Trump being elected president. And with the reason why we're doing that is actually, we really kind of have to give some context around this because what has started this is actually in 2007, when Ron Paul is sitting in his living room, standing there and saying, I'm going to run for president. Nobody's interested in what I have to say. They're not going to be interested in what I have to say. And then he gets on stage with Rudy Giuliani and a bunch of other neocons and uh, blows people away and ignites a revolution that is still going on today. And it's been gradually moving into this Trump world. And so there's a realignment that's happened. But I would say that the catalyst really is that Ron Paul revolution that never really stopped. It transformed into kind of the Tea Party and then transformed into what we see today, because there were a lot of libertarians that supported Trump in 2016. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't a fan of anybody that was running for president, but there were a lot of libertarians. New Hampshire, the New Hampshire libertarians supported Trump in 2016. And then we have what we have today, which is a lot of expectations that have gone on regarding what Trump's going to do, who his appointments are going to be. Is there a libertarian that's going to be in his cabinet? Because he promised that. He went to the Libertarian Party and spoke at the convention. And, and he's been friendly with libertarians, and he's also listened. That's another thing that's really interesting about him, is he's not somebody who is one way or another. He's kind of a pragmatist. He's not really a libertarian. He's not really a Republican or a Democrat either. He's his own kind of thing. He's a kind of a common sense approach, I would say. If maybe that's going to be offensive to some people, but it's that type of a human being. So his ear is out for what I would say is kind of a truth seeker. He's looking for the truth and to expose him to the ideas of libertarianism has been where some of the shift may have occurred and how his pragmatism works. What's your take?
Well, there's so many places to start. Let me start with this. What the Libertarian Party specifically is doing right now and working with the incoming now after the election Trump administration is the most interesting that the Libertarian Party has ever been to me in my lifetime. I say that as somebody who voted for Gary Johnson twice and Joe Jorgensen in recent times for president. I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party, but as a matter of conscience, that's their candidate in a presidential election is often who I have chose as an objector to the Democratic and Republican candidates who I can't support because they do too much harm and bad things and represent the political establishment that I think needs a good kick in the gut. Mm-hmm. Our friend Eric Brakey, we were talking about, or I guess on X, if people know who I'm talking about, who runs the Free State Project now, put it like this as far as libertarians split over the LP or libertarians in general working with Donald Trump. If he continues on his promise, and Trump promised twice to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, something that libertarians have been talking about and wanting for years and years, a man who's unjustly been put in prison with consecutive life sentences in a cruel and unusual way, and we can all agree as libertarians that he needs his freedom. It's been long enough. Donald Trump promised when he spoke to the Libertarian Party National Convention he would commute his sentence. He promised a second time at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, I think that was over the summer maybe, that he would do it again because, he's a Bitcoin libertarians. This is their guy. That's what's in his head. Eric Brakey said this: if he follows through on his promise, there will be two types of libertarians. There will be those of us to say, thank God Ross Ulbricht's ordeal is over. And there will be the kind of libertarians who say, Trump's just trying to fool us into thinking he's we think he's a libertarian. I can't tell you how much contempt I have for the second view because it's absolutely stupid. What are we doing here? I can understand people who just Trump rubs them the wrong way. I did not vote for him until this election. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I didn't vote for him in 2020. I didn't like how he talked about immigrants in 2016, but that problem's gotten so bad that, well, I don't, that is something that needs to be fixed. I just didn't like his language about it. I don't like dehumanizing people. And I didn't like that. I wasn't going to vote for Hillary. I don't like neoconservatives either, but I understand if it rubs you the wrong way. But if your concern is, oh my God, a main libertarian goal, freeing Ross Ulbricht, something we thought impossible, has happened, and I'm happy about it, that's the kind of libertarian I am. I want libertarian things to happen. I'm less concerned with why than if they happen. If it's Donald Trump's ego, hey, libertarians, you had my back. Enough of you voted for me. I got you, boy. Cool. That's how we got there. Cool. If you have a problem with that and would prefer that Ross Ulbricht remain in prison indefinitely, because Kamala Harris sure as hell wasn't going to do that, or anybody like that, or Mitt Romney or John McCain weren't going to do that, or anybody like that, why the hell do you care about any of this? It's all about your branding and your ego. And look at me, I'm a libertarian. I don't like Trump. I don't like, look at me. I mean, that's the virtue signaling of the left. That's no different than MAGA Republicans who don't think about any of this stuff and just run around with a red hat on, like, yeah, Trump, all right, yeah. That's what you are as a libertarian, if that's your position. There's a lot of people who think that. I'm going to salute Angela McArdle and what they did with the Trump administration if that comes to fruition. And that's just the beginning. Let's talk about foreign policy and ending the wars in Ukraine and a diplomatic peace in Gaza and Israel and what's going on there. Let's talking about getting away from the government forcing platforms to censor and all that. Let's talk about wrecking corporatism and some of the stuff RFK Jr. talks about. Do I care if RFK Jr. is a pure libertarian? That would be cool, but he's not. The closest to the administration so far is probably Vivek Ramaswamy, but that's not what's important to me. What's important to me is what they do, the results we get. If the Department of Government Efficiency, directed by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, is getting rid of the Department of Education, something libertarians have wanted since Ronald Reagan promised it in 1980 that he would do that and never did it, good. That is a good thing. The libertarian who looks at that is like, I don't want anything to do with this because it's right leaning, or I don't want to have MAGA on me, or what. Tough, yes. Like, what do you do with it? I just turned 50, Kurt. I was part of the Ron Paul Revolution in 2008, 2012. And Dr. Paul, if you watch the Liberty Report with Dan McAdams, basically what I'm saying right now, if Trump does good stuff, he talks about it on the Liberty Report and he encourages it, as any sane libertarian would. And if Trump's doing bad stuff, he talks about that too.
As we should. We shouldn't
Right.
stop doing that. Yeah, it's
No.
not but to expect Trump to be well, in terms of the reason why I brought up the Ron Paul Revolution is because you had people that were minimized. The Ron Paul people were called terrorists by Glenn Beck.
Yes.
If you remember when
100%.
November 5th and the
Absolutely.
media,
Guy Fawkes.
basically crapped all over the Ron Paul Revolution. The Ron Paul Revolution was fighting the Republican establishment at that time.
Right.
Okay. Now what's happened since is that the Republican Party is not what it was before. It's
Correct.
changed tremendously, and libertarians have had a lot to do with that. And it's the pragmatists, it's the Clint Russells, the Dave Smiths, the
Correct.
Angela McArdle. These are the people that have been in there. You've got kind of two factions of the Libertarian Party right now. And there's a big problem in the Libertarian Party because it got reduced. You have the kind of the Mises Caucus, you have these kind of left-leaning libertarians, and you have the purists. And I would say that I'm kind of in that category of, natural law and not so much a pragmatist traditionally, but over the last several years, with the danger of our civil liberties being completely destroyed, the hyperinflation, potential for hyperinflation, the wars, the crazy proxy war in Ukraine, all these people that are dying because of that, and then the realignment of the establishment actually moving from the Republican Party over to the Democrat Party. You've got, I mean, with the Cheneys, the world couldn't be any more absurd, along with the realignment of all of these people that have been traditionally on the left going into the Republican Party and actually supporting and openly supporting Donald Trump. So there is a shift happening, but I will blame it on the libertarians, and we need the purists. We need the libertarians that stay true to themselves. So you know, I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to those libertarians that are like that. They're kind of, this is the base, and if you don't come to me, tough. Okay, that's fine. That keeps the purity there. But being able to be practical about it and move the needle so that and we've seen the needle move. That's the whole point. Since 2008, that election, we've seen the needle move tremendously. I mean, look what happened to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson was, I mean, he was kind of a neocon, right? We had a lot of those that were neocons. I mean, it's strange to watch Hannity on Fox talking about kind of anti-war stuff. I mean, this is like a pro-war machine, let's take away your civil liberties. We've got to have the National Defense Authorization Act, that kind of guy. I mean, he's,
Right.
Ron Paul people were throwing snowballs at this guy and he's moved over, right? So we're winning. They're coming our way.
Yes. So if we're doing an analysis of the American left and right in 2024, let's start with the left. I think you have three kinds of voters that went for Kamala Harris and the Democrats in general in this election. You have independent people who might have voted for Trump at one time or Barack Obama. There's a lot of those people. They used to call them Reagan Democrats back in the day, who didn't like what or believed a lot of what was said about Trump by Democrats and voted for Kamala Harris. You got those people who aren't firm Democrats, just where they kind of ended up. You've got old school liberals who see a lot of what the Democratic Party is doing in terms of favoring censorship and fueling endless wars in Ukraine with American taxpayer dollars and aren't comfortable with it, but they're still not comfortable with Trump. Those people can be our allies. More on that in a second. Then you have millions of voters who aren't thinking a whole lot about this. They just know that they hate Trump so much that Kamala Harris, the most incompetent presidential candidate in my lifetime to take a stab at winning the White House, had to win. Those are a lot of my friends. I talk to these people. And if you try to bring up issues or principle, they're going to rationalize why none of this is happening and Kamala Harris is great and Donald Trump is Hitler. Those people are not helpful. You just have to beat their ass in an election, and we just did, thank God. When I say we, I'm not even talking as libertarians. Like, that is not liberal. We are classical liberals. They are not liberals. They are rejecting it. They think liberalism is bad. So that middle group and the independent group, we're seeing right now, Cenk Uygur tweeted the other day, he shared a post on X. The guy I hated won, and yet I'm so optimistic and I can't figure why. And he deduced, MAGA's not my enemy, nor is the extreme left. The establishment is, and they were defeated. That is correct. That is the right way to look at it. When Ron Paul ran for president in 2008 and 2012, a lot of his supporters, especially in 2008, wanted his vice presidential pick to be Dennis Kucinich, who is a far-left progressive Democratic congressman. This is not new. Replying to Cenk Uygur and what I just said, Matt Gaetz, who was the AG nominee for a time until he took himself out, definitely a MAGA Republican, said to Cenk, these kind of broad ideological coalitions, we should be open to them, talking about how he and Cenk could see eye to eye on maybe issues of war or free speech as liberals of a certain sort. Bernie Sanders, we're talking today, but yesterday tweeted, Elon Musk is right. Oh, hell, what does Bernie Sanders think Elon Musk is right about? And then he explained about all the Pentagon spending and all the waste, and it must end. Can Bernie Sanders team up with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and campaign and petition to cut some of that spending? I'd like to see that. What you have on the right now, I just described the left, is you have your hardcore MAGA types that, what did Trump say one time? He could shoot somebody on Fifth Street, and these people would still support him. There's people like that, and
Sure.
they can be helpful because most of them are anti-war now. Might not even know why, but who cares? They are. Like, we got to stop these wars. America first. Damn right. Come on, come aboard. You got
Yep.
those people. But you also have this broad ideological, and let me also add multiracial coalition. More black voters than ever, big time, voted for Trump in this election. Half of Hispanics
Mhm.
overall voted for Trump in this election. You know, Trump's a terrible white supremacist Hitler so far. Um, you have that, and you have people like Elon Musk, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, who are former Democrats, like in recent times. Tulsi Gabbard was the vice chairman for the DNC in 2016, and when she saw Team Hillary stealing the primaries from Bernie Sanders, she stepped down in protest. That's what kind of Democrat she was. She hasn't really changed her views that much. She's a veteran, very anti-war. RFK hasn't changed his views. Elon Musk hasn't changed his views. The parties and where they have ended up have changed. So on the right, you have this broad ideological coalition that can include libertarians. I haven't seen polling on it, Kurt, but my gut tells me that more people who identify as libertarians, small L and some big L, probably voted for Trump in this election than Chase Oliver, who I think ran a fine campaign. I have nothing against him, but we're just in a different world with this election, different context.
Sure.
There's a lot to work with there. I'm optimistic. This is the first time I've been optimistic about who won the general presidential election in my lifetime. I was not like, man, if Mitt Romney wins, things are going to be great. No, in fact, I voted for the Libertarian Party candidate because I thought he sucked. I thought neoconservatism needed to end. Barack Obama had some hope, and that quickly went away when I saw how he operated. But I knew the neocons needed to get their ass kicked in that election, and that happened. This is the first time it like we might be utterly disappointed across the board, but my hope is that we're not. And there are going to be some disappointments, but there's a lot of good things that could happen with a anti-establishment disruptor candidate. The reason the Democratic establishment and the old Republican establishment, the Dick Cheneys, the Liz Cheneys, fought so hard, tooth and nail, to stop Trump from winning is they know he might come in there and disrupt things and challenge them and their power in the deep state and all that. And that's what we can hope for. As libertarians, that's what we should want more than
Well, if you
brand.
sure, sure, and if when you look at the way that the libertarians were treated and the ideas that libertarians have had the whole time,
Yes,
which are consistent. So one thing that if you're not a libertarian, you don't have a lot of context around it. Libertarians have generally been friends with people on the left and friends with people on the right because the
correct.
left were civil liberties and anti-war, and the people on the right were fiscally conservative, and that's primarily the reason on the right. Uh,
Sure.
but the ideas of dismantling government, ending the Fed, ending the IRS, ending these bloated departments, the Department of Education, things like that. We were called kooks and outsiders and wackos. Ron Paul was minimized, and he was, bottom tier. Remember, he was bottom tier. He was never top tier, even though he raised more money than everybody else in the Republican Party. And but that has shifted. Now we're we're at a totally different stage, right? So libertarians should be happy. We should still be vigilant, should be patting ourselves on the back a little bit about the hard work that's been done over the last 17 years. And right now they're talking about ending the Department of Education and putting it back in the states, putting it back in the hands of the parents. And it's like it's kind of like what Ron Paul would say, any issue that is personal, the more personal it is, the more local it should be. Right. And same thing with abortion. Abortion's not going to be, you're not going to go to jail because you get an abortion as a woman. It's really been brought back to the states so that people can make those decisions as they need to. The structure of government has just, it's like what happened in the United States is that the states created the federal government, the general government. So that was their child, right? Their brainchild. And then the child turned into a teenager, and then an out of control teenager. And now what's happening is that's shifting again. So the power is being moved back. And so this realignment is it's pretty massive. And I would say even in some ways it could be considered a spiritual realignment, because there's a lot of people who are in pain, and they're angry and upset on the left, and they're having to really re-examine themselves. And I think on the right has been the same thing. And really, the Republican Party it's not your Bush party. It's not Mitt
They
Romney's
ran.
party. It's not McCain's party. They're all gone. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they call themselves Democrats, but it really is what you said. It's the parties themselves, that really is irrelevant what the party is called. Like, libertarians would have gone toward the Democrat Party if the Democrat Party would have been, hey, we have out of control spending and we need to cut government. I mean, it really wouldn't matter to us what the name of the party is. We would prefer it to be in the Libertarian Party, but that's the way that the system is rigged. The two parties have control over the debates, and they have control over the narrative and that sort of thing. But I would even be bold enough to suggest that maybe the Democrat Party could go away, could be something else.
If that's the neoconservative party now. When I was a young man, when I was an anti-war Pat Buchanan supporter, long before Ron Paul was a national name, and I considered myself a libertarian, I did not at the time. I was just an anti-war conservative.
Mhm.
My dream when I was like 19, 20, 21 was to kick the neoconservatives back to the Democratic Party from whence they came. Well, here we are, and Liz Cheney and her dad are endorsing the Democratic presidential candidate. Like, so, and if we're talking about big things and dreams that libertarians might have that seem impossible in most scenarios, the United States underwent a big change with FDR and the New Deal. That's when government grew in a big way in World War II and everything that happened. One of the few just wars we should have been involved in, and people can debate that. How we got there is a different story, but just saying, government grew during that time and it has grown ever since. That can't last forever. It has to go in the opposite direction if we're not just going to completely collapse financially, culturally, even. And this might be the opportunity to do that. What I meant when I said earlier about libertarian dreams and big ideas, I said earlier I wanted the neocons to go back to the Democratic Party when I was a young man. Well, that's happened. It happened in a way I never could have predicted, but here we are. That's not to say there's not neocons in the Republican Party. They just don't have the power they used to, and that's the difference. A dream of a libertarian might be, man, I want Ron Paul to be president, and we can have people in his cabinet that just slash the hell out of government, like cut it hardcore. And we'd be like, well, he's probably not going to be president, and even maybe that's a little extreme. We might not get that. Well, Ron Paul never became president. Donald Trump did, and he's got a department dedicated to that with two of the most high-profile names out there, including the richest man in the world.
And including Ron Paul as an advisor.
Including Ron Paul as an advisor, and Argentina's president, Milei, is involved in this somehow too, who has already cut government, got rid of his country's version of the IRS, and his country's doing better than ever. So that's where we're at. If you're a libertarian, you're like, man, I'm really mad at this department that's going to cut all this government because I don't like Trump. I don't know what to tell you. Like, cool, go walk around at some convention and be proud of yourself or whatever. But I want that government to be cut, and I want the country to be better.
Let me ask you something else in this kind of new construct, because we're talking more broadly. Social conservatives, are they included? Is there a place for them? Is that Trump's effort to talk about God and family? And in terms of the Republican Party, it is a different party now. It's not where the value voters would sit comfortably, and bloodthirsty war against Iran type people.
Sure, that used to be mixed up with the social conservatism, which I found disgusting at the time. But
unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, so I'll say this on multiple fronts. I'm a libertarian. I believe in social tolerance. I'm glad that my gay friends can get married. I want my trans friends to be respected. That doesn't mean that biological men should be in sports or that kids should be, have surgery. Like, I don't agree with
Both
any
can
of
be
that.
true at the same time. You can
Right.
love
But
and
I
care
have
about each human being as they are, with the choices that they make, as long as they're not harming other people or doing things that are imbalance or unbalanced, such as
correct.
sports.
Right.
And also uh, children being
right.
transitioned. You have to be an adult to buy booze. You have to be an adult to go fight in a war. This is like a pretty serious dismantling of your body. You have to be an
Absolutely. Yeah.
adult
When
to
I
make
was
that
10, I
decision.
wanted to be Bo or Luke Duke, but I don't think I should have had surgery to turn myself into Bo or Luke Duke because things were going to change as I got older. So, like, and I'm not saying there's not trans kids that young, but you're too young to figure it out. Like, anyways, I'm a Christian. I'm pro life. The way the laws are now with the overturning of Roe is what I thought they should have been all along. From the extremes in the abortion debate are abortion anytime throughout, even the third trimester, which was legal under Roe. Some states had that, some didn't, but it was legal. Or national abortion ban, which I don't want. And I'm pro-life. I think life begins at a conception.
Mhm.
Or the states decide on their own, which is where it is right now. As somebody that's pro-life, I don't like some of the ramifications for that because I think you are taking a life. But from a pro-choice standpoint, I don't think medical decisions should come from the federal level. From a pro-life standpoint, I don't think murder laws should be at the federal level. So both of those things are true. I wish we lived in a culture where, if a woman needs to get an abortion, and there are those instances where there's health, people talk about rape and incest and debate all that, or just all sorts of things. We're not doctors, that it would be between a woman and her doctor, and that abortion was necessary, but the recognition that they had to do this horrific thing that still was necessary. This is a life. This is a life. No, we live in a culture where they park abortion trucks outside the Democratic National Convention and celebrate it.
Mm.
No, no. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. What I just said makes sense under the right, this MAGA right. Trump doesn't want a national abortion ban. Trump, pro-lifers, should be grateful appointed judges that did overturn Roe, which is always shaky constitutionally. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her entire judicial career, said this is not going to stand
She was a
forever.
Democrat. Yeah.
She was a Democrat who was pro-choice and feminist and all that.
Mhm.
And she was correct. And she said, you need to codify this into law. And they never did. And what happened, happened. But I think social conservatives should celebrate that victory on the life front. That's a big deal that a lot of us thought would never happen. And there's a place for our LGBT friends that, doesn't have to encroach on those who don't agree with that lifestyle and let them be on their own. And, I think we're in a good place. I think we're in a hopeful place. I think we're in a place where there's a lot of tolerance to be had. The biggest bulwark to tolerance and people being intolerant are the people on the left who are just going to be like, "Oh, Trump saved drowning puppies. I still hate him." That
Right.
kind of stuff.
It's the dehumanization of a
Yes,
man or a populace. It's the same thing with the pro-abortion.
right.
I'm not
They
saying everybody. I
dehumanize.
mean, look, when somebody goes through that experience, it's very traumatic. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah,
And something you said was kind of interesting. I've never heard this before. Uh, you talked about it in the context of almost like performing a ceremony to honor this life that was lost because you know the mother needed to be saved or whatever
right.
the medical reason behind it. It we don't have that kind of a culture now where
You
we could
don't
say, hey, this is both are true. Yes, this needs to happen, but at the same time we also need to
recognize
uh,
the gravity of what's happening, and they too many
yeah,
times they don't. They're just like, "Oh, I'm going to shout my abortion. It's not even a human
right.
being."
Right.
Yeah,
And sometimes that's an emotional reaction. I'm not a psychologist, but I kind of understand a little bit about it going through living as long as I have. And, sometimes the person that's yelling the loudest is the one that's in the most pain. And they're the ones that are trying to cover up something that
yes.
is traumatic and upsetting. And so,
Absolutely.
you know,
I don't
we
I don't want to derail the conversation. We're talking about libertarians and Trump and what's going on. But the reason I used to be pro-choice in my 20s, I didn't think about the issue much. I was just like, hey, I'm a party dude. I like hooking up with chicks and I want the option. Basically was my attitude. Um, but I was anti-war. I was political. I was anti-war. I thought about that a lot. During the Bush era, I would talk to even evangelical Christians, and I'd be like, "Hey, we just bombed a school bus in Iraq today. That ain't right. We paid for that." They'd be like, "Stuff happens, collateral damage." I'm like, 16-year-olds get pregnant accidentally. Does that collateral like?" They're like, "No, that's different. That's a life. That's a life." I'm like, "Well, those kids in the school bus were alive too. We're fighting a stupid war that don't make sense, and we paid for that." And they would just dismiss it. And that's what made me think about the abortion issue. I'm like, I'm being dismissive of this life in the way that they're dismissive. It was super pro-war evangelical Christians that made me pro-life. Not their arguments like you should be pro-life, their dismissiveness of life, the dehumanization. Oh, it's just collateral damage or Arab. No, those are human beings that we help kill in a roundabout way. And that's how I began to view life, in the womb.
Well
It's the
said.
same thing. I
Yes.
will never dehumanize or dismiss life in any context.
Well, that's the consistent principle.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, maybe we can end this conversation around it. I think that's where libertarians are always searching, and that's why there's concern around compromise. If you have your libertarian friends, I look, I got a call in 2016, well, 2015, I guess, whenever the primaries were starting in New
Mhm.
Hampshire, and I thought, Rand Paul was going to be the one. You and I went up to
Oh yeah.
DC during that, um, kind of exploratory meeting
Sure.
with Rand and a few, a number of other people. But that, I was excited. I was thinking, Rand's got an opportunity. He's going to be on stage. And I get a call from a friend of mine in New Hampshire. I'm not going to say his name because he hasn't given me permission, but I don't think he would care.
Mhm.
And he says, Kurt, the New Hampshire Libertarians were supporting Donald Trump. And
Mhm.
I said, yeah, funny. Get out of here. Oh, wait. What are you talking about? That's a funny one. I thought he was joking. And he said, no, we vetted him and he passed with flying colors. And I
Sure.
said, you're telling me that he answered every question correctly about what libertarians care about. He said, absolutely. We even asked to pull his hair. We asked if his hair was real, and somebody went up and pulled his hair. And I said, okay, I believe you now. I mean, and that's actually what happened. New Hampshire it was interesting how that was one of the early kind of groups of people, libertarians that were going after that. And you'd think the Free State
Sure.
Project, Pork Fest, hardcore libertarians, that's a hotbed up there. And they were willing to take that plunge, and it's been interesting ever since. So I do think that libertarians can be practical and still hold on to the core of their
Of course.
the center of their big L beliefs.
I will go further, Kurt. If you're not down with some of the libertarian opportunities that's going to happen during the Trump administration, they might not happen, but they're opportunities and they're there. You're not down with that, and you're running around calling yourself a libertarian. What the hell good is that?
And
You're
that and that
the useless
conversations
libertarian,
that conversation's in the executive branch now. Ending
right?
ending departments is in the executive branch now. That's
Right.
actually happening. We couldn't have fathomed that would
No.
actually be a thing, that they would even talk about it, let alone it looks like they're going to do it. So I think in first week, uh, Trump could reverse the executive order that Jimmy Carter signed and creating
Yeah.
the Department
I
of
don't know what's
Education and
I don't know what's
eliminate
going to
that.
look like. He promised like 10 million things on day one. There's no way to do 10 million things on day one, but if day 10
Week
it's done,
one,
right?
yeah, he'll be a dictator on day one, and then the rest of
And
the
that was a
time,
joke that everybody ran away
yeah,
with.
of
Yeah.
course, of course. A lot of the things that were said were taken out of context. We could do a whole podcast on that. But Jack, where can people find your work?
You can find me on Substack at Base Politics, where I work with my friends Hannah Cox and Brad Palumbo. We've been doing lots of fun things there from a libertarian perspective. You can find me on X, formerly Twitter, at Jack Hunter74. And I also write frequently for the American Conservative, the Washington Examiner, and I do a lot of movie reviews at Modern Age, which is an old conservative quarterly founded in the late 1950s by Russell Kirk. So I
Oh,
do all those things.
nice. I'll have to go check out the movie
Yeah,
reviews. I love movies, so
me
and
too.
popcorn like you do as well. All right, Jack, thanks for your time today.
Take care, Kurt. Good to talk to you.
Goodbye.
You're a fucking genius.